the gunshot that shattered the morning silence of Humboldt, Nevada, in 1883, sent Adelaide O'Connor running toward the general store she managed, her heart pounding with fear that another robbery was underway. But what she found instead was a tall cowboy standing over a rattlesnake he'd just shot before it could strike old Mr. Henderson. "You saved his life," Adelaide breathed, her hand pressed against her chest as she took in the scene. The cowboy turned to face her, and she found herself looking into the most startling blue eyes she'd ever seen. "Just doing what anyone would do, madam," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that suggested he'd come from somewhere south. "Name's Quinn Dawson. Just rode into town this morning." Adelaide nodded, trying to compose herself. At 22, she'd learned to keep her emotions carefully controlled, especially around men. Her experience with love had taught her that it was nothing more than a fairy tale, a cruel joke played on women who were foolish enough to believe in it. "Adelaide O'Connor. I manage the general store here." Mr. Henderson was profusely thanking Quinn, shaking his hand with such vigor that Adelaide worried the old man might injure himself. "You need anything while you're in town, young man, anything at all, you just let me know. I owe you my life." Quinn smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "I appreciate that, sir. I'm actually looking for work. Heard there might be some ranches around here hiring." "The Morrison Ranch, about 5 miles north," Adelaide found herself saying, though she wasn't sure why she was helping this stranger. "They're always looking for good hands. Much obliged, Miss O'Connor." Quinn's eyes lingered on her face for a moment longer than was strictly proper, and Adelaide felt a flutter in her stomach that she immediately suppressed. She'd felt that flutter before, 3 years ago, and it had led to nothing but heartbreak. She turned to walk back to the store, but Quinn's voice stopped her. "Miss O'Connor, if it wouldn't be too forward, might I ask where a man could get a decent meal in this town?" "The boarding house serves supper at 6, she said without turning around. "Mrs. Campbell is the proprietress. Tell her I sent you." As Adelaide walked away, she could feel his eyes on her back, and she forced herself not to look over her shoulder. She'd learned her lesson about cowboys and their charming smiles. 3 years ago, she'd fallen for a smooth-talking ranch hand named Thomas who'd promised her the world, promised they'd get married and build a life together. She'd believed every word, had given him her heart completely, only to wake up one morning to find him gone, along with the store's cash box and her father's gold watch. Her father had died of a fever the following winter, and Adelaide had always wondered if the heartbreak of the theft had contributed to his decline. Since then, she'd run the store with an iron will and an impenetrable heart. She had no family left, no close friends, just the store and her small room above it. It was a lonely existence, but it was safe. Safe from disappointment, safe from heartbreak, safe from the lies men told when they wanted something from you. The rest of the day passed in its usual rhythm. Adelaide restocked shelves, helped customers, tallied accounts, and tried very hard not to think about the blue-eyed cowboy who'd ridden into town. But that evening, as she was closing up the store, she heard a gentle knock on the door. Quinn Dawson stood on the other side of the glass, his hat in his hands. Against her better judgment, Adelaide unlocked the door. "Mr. Dawson, I'm afraid we're closed for the day." "I know, and I apologize for the intrusion," he said. "I just wanted to thank you for the recommendation. Mrs. Campbell set me up with a room and the finest pot roast I've had in months, and I got the job at the Morrison Ranch. Start tomorrow morning." "That's good to hear," Adelaide said, keeping her voice neutral. "Was there something you needed?" Quinn shifted his weight, looking almost nervous. "I was wondering if you might allow me to escort you to church on Sunday. Mrs. Campbell mentioned there's a service, and I figured it would be a good way to meet more folks in town. Thought it might be nice to have a familiar face there. We've only just met, Mr. Dawson. I'd hardly call myself a familiar face. You're the first person in Humboldt to speak kindly to me. That counts for something in my book. Adelaide felt her resolve wavering. There was something different about this man, something in the earnest way he looked at her that seemed genuine. But she'd thought that about Thomas too. I appreciate the offer, but I attend church alone. It's my preference. Quinn nodded, accepting her refusal with grace. I understand. Well, I'm sure I'll see you around town, Miss O'Connor. Have a good evening. As he walked away, Adelaide felt a pang of something that might have been regret. She locked the door and climbed the stairs to her room, where she prepared a simple supper and ate it in silence, as she did every night. But Quinn Dawson proved to be persistent in the gentlest way possible. Over the following weeks, Adelaide couldn't seem to avoid him. He came into the store for supplies, always polite, always respectful, never pushing for more than she was willing to give. He helped old Mrs. Patterson carry her groceries home when Adelaide mentioned the elderly woman was struggling. He fixed a loose board on the store's front steps without being asked. He recommended a book he thought she might enjoy. Why are you doing this? Adelaide finally asked him one afternoon when he'd stopped by to purchase tobacco and had ended up spending 20 minutes helping her reorganize the stockroom. Doing what? Quinn looked genuinely confused, being so helpful, so persistent. Quinn set down the crate he'd been moving and wiped his hands on his trousers. Miss O'Connor, I'm just trying to be a decent human being. If that bothers you, I can stop coming around. That's not what I meant. Adelaide struggled to find the right words. I just don't understand what you want from me. Want from you? Quinn's blue eyes searched her face. I don't want anything from you except maybe the chance to know you better. You intrigue me, Adelaide. You're smart, you're capable, you run this store better than most men could, and you've got walls around your heart so high I'd need a ladder to climb them. I'd like to understand why. That's none of your business, Adelaide said sharply, but her hands were trembling. You're right, it's not, Quinn agreed, but I'd like it to be. I'd like you to trust me enough to tell me what put that sadness in your eyes. I'm not sad. I'm perfectly content with my life, if you say so. Quinn picked up his package of tobacco. But just so you know, I'm not going anywhere. I like this town. I like my job, and I like you. I'm willing to wait however long it takes for you to see that not every man is whatever it was that hurt you so badly. After he left, Adelaide sat down heavily on a wooden stool, her mind racing. How had he seen through her so easily? She'd spent 3 years building those walls, perfecting her mask of indifference, and this cowboy had seen right through them in a matter of weeks. That Sunday, Adelaide went to church as usual, sitting in her customary pew near the back. She was surprised when Quinn slid into the seat beside her, giving her a small smile but saying nothing. His presence was both comforting and unsettling. After the service, he walked beside her in companionable silence until they reached the store. Would you like to take a walk with me this afternoon? Quinn asked. It's a beautiful day, and I found a nice spot by the creek, peaceful. Every instinct Adelaide had screamed at her to say no, to maintain her distance, to protect herself. But a small voice, one she'd been suppressing for 3 years, whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was tired of being alone. I closed the store for a few hours on Sunday afternoons. I suppose a walk would be acceptable. Quinn's face lit up with a smile that made Adelaide's heart skip a beat. I'll come by at 2 o'clock if that suits you. Adelaide spent the intervening hours second-guessing her decision. She changed her dress twice, then scolded herself for caring what she wore. She was just going for a walk, nothing more. It didn't mean anything. But when Quinn arrived at precisely 2 o'clock, looking clean and freshly shaved, wearing a shirt that brought out the blue of his eyes, Adelaide felt that dangerous flutter again. They walked through town and out toward the creek, the late summer sun warm on their faces. Quinn talked easily about his work at the ranch, about the horses he was training, about the landscape of Nevada that was so different from his native Texas. Adelaide found herself relaxing, even sharing a few details about running the store, about the challenges of managing inventory and dealing with difficult customers. "You're good at what you do," Quinn observed. "Anyone can see that. But is it what you want to do? If you could do anything in the world, what would it be?" Adelaide was quiet for a long moment. No one had ever asked her that before. "I used to want to teach," she admitted. "When I was younger, I thought I might become a school teacher. But then my mother died, and my father needed help with the store, and then he died, and now the store is all I have." "It doesn't have to be all you have," Quinn said gently. "Doesn't it?" Adelaide stopped walking and turned to face him. "I have no family, Mr. Dawson. The store is my livelihood, my home, my entire life. I can't just abandon it to chase some childhood dream. I'm not suggesting you abandon anything, but maybe you don't have to do it alone. I've been alone for a long time. I'm used to it." Quinn reached out and gently took her hand. Adelaide knew she should pull away, but she didn't. "Adelaide, I know something happened to you. I can see it in the way you hold yourself apart from everyone, in the way you flinch whenever someone gets too close. I don't know what it was, but I want you to know that I'm not him. Whoever hurt you, whatever he did, I'm not him." Tears stung Adelaide's eyes and she blinked them back furiously. "You don't know anything about me. Then tell me. Help me understand." And suddenly, standing by the creek with this man who'd been nothing but kind to her, Adelaide found the words spilling out. She told him about Thomas, about the promises and the lies, about waking up to find him gone and the store robbed. She told him about her father's decline, about the loneliness and the fear and the decision to never let anyone close enough to hurt her again. Quinn listened without interrupting, his hand steady and warm around hers. When she finished, her voice breaking on the last few words, he pulled her gently into his arms. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," he said softly, his chin resting on the top of her head. "You deserved so much better than that. You still do." Adelaide allowed herself to lean into his embrace for just a moment before pulling back. "That's why I can't do this, Quinn. I can't let myself care about someone again. The risk is too great." "Love is always a risk," Quinn said. "But it's also the most worthwhile thing in the world when it's real. That's just it. I don't believe love is real. It's a fairy tale we tell ourselves, a pretty story that has nothing to do with reality." Quinn was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Let me prove it's real and worth it." "What?" "Give me a chance, Adelaide. Let me show you that real love exists, that it's not just some fairy tale. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow or even to trust me completely right now. I'm just asking you to let me try to prove to you that what we could have together is worth the risk." Adelaide looked up into his earnest blue eyes and saw nothing but sincerity there. "And if you fail, if this ends badly, then at least you'll know you tried. You'll know you didn't let fear rule your life forever." It was a compelling argument, and Adelaide found herself wavering. "I don't know if I can do this." "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met," Quinn said. "You've survived loss and betrayal and built a life for yourself from nothing. You can do anything you set your mind to, including giving love another chance. You're very persuasive, Mr. Dawson." "Does that mean you'll let me court you properly?" Adelaide took a deep breath. This was terrifying, this feeling of standing on the edge of a precipice, about to jump into the unknown. But maybe, just maybe, Quinn would catch her. "One condition. If at any point I ask you to leave me alone, you'll respect that." "I promise," Quinn said solemnly. "Though I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you never want to ask me that." Over the following weeks, Quinn kept his word. He courted Adelaide with a patience and tenderness that slowly began to chip away at her defenses. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow near the ranch. He fixed things around the store without being asked. He listened when she talked about her day, really listened, asking questions and remembering details. One evening, he brought his guitar and played for her in the small sitting room above the store. His voice was rich and warm as he sang old ballads and folk songs, and Adelaide found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. "My mother taught me to play," Quinn said when he'd finished a particularly beautiful song. "She said music was good for the soul." "She was right," Adelaide said softly. "That was lovely." "She would have liked you," Quinn said. "She always said I should find a woman with strength and kindness in equal measure. That's you, Adelaide. Where is your mother now?" Adelaide asked, realizing she knew very little about Quinn's family. Quinn's expression grew sad. "She passed when I was 17. Cholera. My father followed her 2 years later. I think he died of a broken heart more than anything else. He never stopped loving her, never even looked at another woman after she was gone. That's the kind of love I want, Adelaide, the kind that lasts until death and beyond." "That's a high standard," Adelaide said, but her voice was gentle. "You're worth a high standard." As autumn painted the Nevada landscape in shades of gold and amber, Adelaide found herself looking forward to Quinn's visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. He was different from any man she'd ever known. He was patient where Thomas had been pushy, honest where Thomas had been deceptive, steady where Thomas had been unpredictable. One October afternoon, Quinn invited Adelaide to visit the Morrison Ranch. "I want to show you something," he said mysteriously. Adelaide closed the store early and rode out with Quinn in the ranch's wagon. The Morrison spread was impressive, with rolling pastures and well-maintained buildings. But Quinn drove past the main house to a smaller structure set back among a grove of cottonwood trees. "This used to be the old ranch house, before they built the new one," Quinn explained as he helped Adelaide down from the wagon. "Mr. Morrison said I could fix it up if I wanted to live here instead of in the bunkhouse. I've been working on it in my spare time." The house was small but charming, with a wide front porch and large windows. Inside, Adelaide could see that Quinn had been hard at work. The floors had been sanded and polished, the walls freshly painted. There was a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. "It's lovely," Adelaide said, walking through the space. "You've done beautiful work." "I keep thinking about what you said about wanting to teach," Quinn said, following her. "The Morrison Ranch has about 15 families working on it, and they've got nearly 30 children between them." Mr. Morrison mentioned he'd been thinking about hiring a teacher, setting up a little school for the kids so they don't have to ride all the way into town. "I thought maybe this house could work for that. The main room here could be the classroom, and you could live in the back." Adelaide turned to stare at him. "You did all this for me. I wanted you to see that you don't have to choose between the store and teaching. You could hire someone to help run the store, come out here during the day to teach, or sell the store if you wanted to." "I'm not trying to tell you what to do, Adelaide. I just wanted you to know that you have options, that there's a future beyond what you've imagined for yourself." Tears filled Adelaide's eyes, but this time they were tears of wonder rather than pain. "No one's ever done anything like this for me." Quinn crossed the room and gently cupped her face in his hands. "Adelaide O'Connor, I love you. I've loved you since the first moment I saw you running toward that general store with fear in your eyes and courage in your heart. I love your strength, your intelligence, your kindness, and even those walls you built to protect yourself. I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that love is real, that it's worth every risk, every fear, every moment of vulnerability." Adelaide's breath caught in her throat. "Quinn, you don't have to say it back," Quinn said quickly. "I'm not expecting that. I just needed you to know how I feel." But Adelaide realized, standing in that little house that Quinn had restored with his own hands, thinking of her dreams and her future, that she did want to say it back. The walls around her heart had crumbled so gradually she hadn't even noticed, and now she stood defenseless before this man who'd shown her nothing but patience and love. "I love you too," she whispered, and it was the most terrifying and exhilarating thing she'd ever said. Quinn's face transformed with joy and he leaned down to kiss her. It was Adelaide's first real kiss, tender and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "So what do you think?" Quinn asked, gesturing to the house. "Could you see yourself teaching here? Could you see yourself building a life with me?" Adelaide walked to the window and looked out at the golden cottonwood trees, at the mountains in the distance, at the wide Nevada sky. She thought about the general store, about the safe, lonely life she'd built for herself. And then she thought about the possibility of something more, something beautiful and frightening and real. "I think I'd like to try," she said finally. "I'm still scared, Quinn. I'm terrified that this is all going to fall apart somehow." "That's okay," Quinn said, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Being scared just means it matters. And I promise you, Adelaide, I'm going to show up every single day and prove to you that this is real." That winter, Adelaide hired a young widow named Sarah to help manage the store. Sarah needed the work, and Adelaide found that she enjoyed having someone to share the responsibilities with. It freed her up to start planning for the school. Mr. Morrison was enthusiastic about the idea, and by spring, Adelaide had a classroom set up in Quinn's little house. She started with just 5 students, children of the ranch hands who were eager to learn their letters and numbers. Adelaide discovered that teaching brought her a joy she'd never found in running the store. Watching the children's faces light up when they mastered a new concept, seeing their confidence grow, knowing she was making a real difference in their lives, it was everything she dreamed of and more. Quinn proposed on a warm evening in May, almost a year after he'd first ridden into Humboldt. He took Adelaide back to the creek where they'd had their first real conversation, and as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, he got down on one knee. "Adelaide O'Connor, you've made me the happiest man alive just by letting me love you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Adelaide didn't hesitate. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The ring was simple, a gold band with a small diamond, and it fit perfectly on Adelaide's finger. They were married in June in the little church in Humboldt, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Sarah stood up as Adelaide's maid of honor, and one of Quinn's fellow ranch hands served as his best man. As Adelaide walked down the aisle toward Quinn, she marveled at how much her life had changed in just over a year. She'd gone from believing love was a fairy tale to standing here, about to marry the most wonderful man she'd ever known. Quinn had kept his promise. He'd shown up every single day, through her doubts and fears, through difficult moments and beautiful ones, and he'd proven that love was real. Their wedding night was spent in the little house that would be their home, and Adelaide discovered new depths of love and intimacy in Quinn's arms. He was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished every moment. "I never knew it could be like this," Adelaide whispered as they lay together afterward, Quinn's arms wrapped around her. "Like what?" Quinn asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "So beautiful, so right. I spent so long thinking love was just a pretty lie, and now I can't imagine my life without it. Without you. "You'll never have to," Quinn promised. "I'm yours for as long as we both shall live, and probably beyond that too." The months that followed were the happiest of Adelaide's life. She taught during the day, watching her little school grow to include 12 students by fall. Quinn worked on the ranch, training horses and managing the cattle. In the evenings, they would sit together on their porch, Quinn playing his guitar while Adelaide corrected lessons, or simply enjoyed the peaceful beauty of the Nevada landscape. But their happiness was tested that winter when Quinn was thrown from a particularly ornery horse and broke his leg badly. Adelaide rushed to his side, her heart in her throat, terrified that she was about to lose him the way she'd lost everyone else she'd ever loved. "I'm okay," Quinn said through gritted teeth as the doctor set his leg. "It's going to take more than a broken bone to take me away from you." Adelaide stayed by his side throughout his recovery, which took several long weeks. She read to him, brought him his meals, helped him when he needed to move around. And she realized that this was what real love looked like, not just the beautiful moments, but the difficult ones too. The commitment to stay, to care, to love even when things were hard. "You didn't have to do all this," Quinn said one evening as Adelaide helped him into bed. "Sarah could have come to help, or Mrs. Morrison offered to send someone." "I wanted to," Adelaide said simply. "You've taken care of me in so many ways, Quinn. Let me take care of you now." Quinn reached for her hand and brought it to his lips. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" "Not in the last hour," Adelaide teased. "Well, that's far too long. I love you, Adelaide Dawson. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." "You're the best thing that ever happened to me too," Adelaide said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. By spring, Quinn was fully recovered and back to work. Adelaide's school continued to flourish, and she found herself thinking about the future, about the family she and Quinn might have someday. One evening in late April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Adelaide said, "Quinn, I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" Quinn asked, his fingers absently strumming his guitar. "I think I'd like to have a baby." Quinn's fingers stilled on the strings, and he turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "Really? You want to start a family?" Adelaide nodded. "I never thought I did. For so long I thought I'd spend my life alone, and I'd convinced myself I was okay with that. But now, with you, I want everything. I want a home full of love and laughter. I want children who grow up knowing they're cherished. I want to build the kind of family I lost." Quinn set down his guitar and pulled Adelaide into his arms. "I want that too. I want it more than anything." Their first child, a son, was born the following February. They named him James after Quinn's father. Adelaide had never known love could expand the way it did when she first held her son in her arms. She loved Quinn with her whole heart, and yet somehow there was room for this new love too, fierce and protective and overwhelming. Quinn was a devoted father from the very first moment. He would walk the floor with James when the baby cried at night, sing him the same songs his mother had sung to him, talk to him in a soft voice about the horses and the ranch, and all the things they would do together when James was older. Adelaide took a few months away from teaching after James was born, but she found that she missed it. So she brought James with her to school, setting up a cradle in the corner of the classroom. The students were delighted to have a baby in their midst, and Adelaide discovered that having James there added a new dimension to her teaching. The older girls learned about caring for infants, and all the children learned gentleness and patience. When James was 2, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant again. This time, they had a daughter, whom they named Eleanor after Quinn's mother. Eleanor had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit, and she had Quinn wrapped around her little finger from day one. "We're outnumbered now," Quinn joked one evening as he held a leaner while James played at his feet. "We certainly are," Adelaide agreed, but she was smiling. This life, this beautiful, chaotic, love-filled life, was more than she'd ever dreamed possible. The years passed in a blur of school days and family dinners, of children's laughter and quiet evenings on the porch. James grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books and horses in equal measure. Alina was spirited and adventurous, always getting into mischief and charming her way out of trouble. Adelaide's school expanded to include nearly 20 students, and the Morrison Ranch built a proper schoolhouse to accommodate them all. Adelaide hired an assistant teacher, a young woman from back east who'd come west seeking adventure. Quinn was promoted to ranch foreman, a position that came with more responsibility but also more respect and a better wage. He was good at his job, fair and hardworking, and the other ranch hands looked up to him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Adelaide with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time they'd been away from the children, the first time they'd traveled anywhere together, and it felt like a second honeymoon. "Can you believe it's been 10 years?" Adelaide asked as they walked along the waterfront, her hand tucked into Quinn's arm. "Best 10 years of my life," Quinn said. "Do you remember when you told me you didn't believe love was real?" Adelaide laughed. "I was such a fool. I'm glad you didn't give up on me." "I knew from the start that you were worth fighting for," Quinn said. "I just had to convince you of that too." They stood watching the ships in the harbor, the San Francisco fog rolling in over the water, and Adelaide reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd been so broken, so convinced that love was nothing but a cruel joke, but Quinn had proven her wrong in the most beautiful way possible. "I used to think that what happened with Thomas ruined me," Adelaide said quietly, "that I'd never be able to trust anyone again. But now I see that it was all part of the journey that led me to you. I wouldn't change anything, Quinn, because it all brought me here." Quinn turned to her, his blue eyes serious. "You were never ruined, Adelaide. You were wounded, but you healed. You're the strongest person I know, and I'm honored every day that you chose to share your life with me." They kissed there on the waterfront as the fog swirled around them, and Adelaide felt the same flutter in her stomach that she'd felt the first time she'd seen Quinn, all those years ago in Humboldt. Some things never changed. When they returned home, James and Alina rushed to greet them, full of stories about their time with Sarah and her family. Adelaide scooped them both up in a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her children, grateful beyond measure for this family she'd never expected to have. That fall brought unexpected news. Adelaide's school was visited by a representative from the Nevada Territorial Education Board, who was so impressed by what she'd built that he offered her a position helping to establish schools throughout the territory. "It would mean travel," the man explained. "You'd be gone perhaps a week out of every month, visiting different communities, training teachers, helping to set up new schools. But you'd be making a real difference, Mrs. Dawson. You'd be shaping education across Nevada." Adelaide was tempted. It was an incredible opportunity, a chance to impact far more children than just those in her little school. But it would also mean time away from Quinn and the children, and that gave her pause. "Can I have some time to think about it?" she asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need." That evening, Adelaide discussed the offer with Quinn. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "Part of me wants to say yes to take this chance to do something important, but part of me doesn't want to leave you and the children, even for a week at a time." Quinn was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Adelaide, do you remember what you told me when I was recovering from my broken leg? You said that I'd taken care of you in so many ways, and you wanted the chance to take care of me too. Well, You've been taking care of our family for years. Let me take care of things while you pursue this opportunity. James and Alina and I will be fine. We'll miss you when you're gone, but we'll be so proud of what you're doing." "Are you sure?" Adelaide asked. "It's a lot to ask." "You're not asking, I'm offering. This is important work, Adelaide. You could change children's lives all across Nevada. How could I not support that?" Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I'm the lucky one," Quinn said, pulling her close. "You took a broken, cynical heart and taught it to love again. That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me." Adelaide accepted the position, and for the next several years, she spent 1 week out of every month traveling across Nevada, helping to establish schools in remote communities. It was challenging work, often involving long days in uncomfortable stage coaches and nights in rough accommodations. But it was also deeply rewarding. She helped train dozens of teachers, helped hundreds of children gain access to education they wouldn't have had otherwise. And true to his word, Quinn managed things beautifully while she was gone. He made sure James and Alina kept up with their studies, prepared their meals, tucked them in at night. The children missed their mother when she was away, but they were proud of her work, and the reunions when she returned home were always joyful. When Adelaide was home, she poured all her energy into her family and her local school. She attended James's school performances and Alina's riding competitions. She and Quinn still sat on their porch in the evenings, his guitar in his hands, her head on his shoulder. The years continued to pass. James grew into a young man who wanted to be a teacher like his mother. Alina surprised everyone by developing a passion for veterinary medicine, inspired by watching the ranch's veterinarian work with the animals. "When did our children get so grown up?" Adelaide asked Quinn one evening as they watched James help Alina with her studies. "I don't know," Quinn admitted. "Seems like just yesterday they were babies." "We're getting old," Adelaide teased. "Speak for yourself." "I'm aging like fine wine," Quinn said, and Adelaide laughed. They were in their 40s now, with silver threading through their hair and lines around their eyes. But Adelaide thought Quinn was more handsome than ever, and the love between them had only deepened with time. When James was 18, he left for a teaching college in California. It was hard to watch him go, but Adelaide was proud of the young man he'd become. Alina followed 2 years later, heading to a veterinary program back east. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, Adelaide and Quinn found themselves alone. "What do we do now?" Adelaide asked, feeling a bit lost in the suddenly quiet house. "Whatever we want," Quinn said. "We've spent 20 years raising those kids and doing a damn fine job of it. Now it's time for us." They traveled more, visiting James and Alina but also exploring places they'd never been. They went to Denver and Santa Fe, to Portland and Seattle. They took a long trip to Texas so Quinn could show Adelaide where he'd grown up. But they always came back to their little house on the Morrison Ranch, to the school that was Adelaide's legacy, to the community they'd built over the years. On their 25th anniversary, their children came home for a surprise celebration. James brought his fiancée, a lovely young woman he'd met at college. Alina brought stories of her work with animals and her excitement about her upcoming graduation. As Adelaide looked around the table at her family, at Quinn's smiling face and her children's happy expressions, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This life, this beautiful, imperfect, love-filled life, was so much more than she'd ever imagined for herself. After dinner, Quinn stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast. 25 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Adelaide, you've given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You've made me a better man, a better father, a better human being. You taught me that love isn't just about the grand gestures or the easy moments. It's about showing up every day, choosing each other every day, building a life together one small decision at a time. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. Adelaide felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she stood to embrace her husband. I love you too, Quinn. You kept your promise. You proved to me that love is real and worth it. You proved it every single day for 25 years. And I'll keep proving it every day for the next 25 and beyond, Quinn said. As the years continued to unfold, Adelaide and Quinn watched their children build their own lives. James became a headmaster of a school in San Francisco, married his sweetheart, and had 3 children of his own. Alina opened a veterinary practice in Denver, married a fellow veterinarian, and had twin boys. Adelaide eventually retired from her position with the Territorial Education Board, but she continued to teach at her local school well into her 60s. She couldn't imagine a life without children around her, without the joy of watching young minds grow and develop. Quinn worked at the Morrison Ranch until his 70th birthday, when the current Mr. Morrison, the son of the man who'd first hired Quinn, insisted he retire with a generous pension. Quinn protested that he was still capable of a full day's work, but Adelaide convinced him that it was time to slow down and enjoy their golden years. They spent their retirement much as they'd spent their life together on their porch, Quinn's guitar in his hands, Adelaide's head on his shoulder. They watched the seasons change on the Nevada landscape. They both loved so much. They welcomed grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren, their house filled with laughter and love during holidays and family gatherings. On a warm summer evening when Adelaide was 75 and Quinn was 78, they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. You remember the first time we sat together and watched the sunset? Quinn asked, his voice a bit rougher with age but still warm. At the creek when I told you about Thomas, Adelaide said. I remember, I was so scared that day. And look at us now, Quinn said. More than 50 years together, 6 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, a lifetime of love. You proved it, Quinn, Adelaide said softly. You proved that love is real and worth it. You proved it every single day. We proved it together, Quinn corrected. You had the courage to try again, to open your heart even when you were terrified. That takes more strength than anything I did. Adelaide reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the decades. I'm glad I took that chance. I'm glad you didn't give up on me. Never even considered it, Quinn said. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were the one. My heart recognized yours. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Adelaide thought about the journey that had brought them here, about the frightened young woman she'd been, and the loved, confident woman she'd become. She thought about all the moments, big and small, that had made up their life together, the joy and the sorrow, the challenges and the triumphs, the everyday moments that had woven together into a beautiful tapestry of love. Quinn, Adelaide said after a while. Yes, love. Thank you for proving to me that fairy tales can come true. Our love story has been better than any fairy tale I could have imagined. Quinn pressed a kiss to her forehead. The best stories are the real ones, the ones we write ourselves with the choices we make and the love we give. And ours is the best story I know. As the Nevada night settled around them, Adelaide closed her eyes and listened to the gentle strumming of Quinn's guitar, the same melodies he'd been playing for her for more than 50 years. She thought about the general store in Humboldt where it had all begun, about the frightened woman who'd been so sure love was nothing but a lie. That woman couldn't have imagined this life, this love, this family. She couldn't have imagined a man like Quinn, who would patiently and persistently prove that love was real, who would show up every day for 50 years, who would love her through youth and middle age and into their golden years. Adelaide had thought love was a fairy tale, something that existed only in stories and songs. But Quinn had proven it was real and worth it, not through grand gestures or pretty words, but through the steady, faithful love he showed her every single day. He'd proven it in the way he listened to her dreams and helped her achieve them, in the way he held her when she was scared and celebrated with her when she succeeded, in the way he was a devoted father to their children and a loving grandfather to their grandchildren, in the way he still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, even with silver in her hair and lines on her face. Their love story wasn't perfect. They'd had arguments and disagreements, difficult times and moments of doubt. But through it all, they'd chosen each other, chosen love, chosen to keep building their life together. And that, Adelaide realized, was what made it real. Fairy tales ended with happily ever after, but real love was about what happened after that. It was about the years and decades of choosing each other, of working through problems, of growing together and separately, of building a life that was messy and beautiful and absolutely worth every risk. Quinn's guitar fell silent, and Adelaide opened her eyes to find him looking at her with those same blue eyes that had captivated her more than 50 years ago. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am for you, for us, for this life we've built. I'm thinking about how wrong I was all those years ago when I said love wasn't real, and I'm thinking about how lucky I am that you were stubborn enough to prove me wrong." Quinn smiled, that same gentle smile that still made her heart flutter. "I'm the lucky one, Adelaide. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day that I rode into Humboldt, Nevada on that summer morning in 1883. Do you ever wonder how different our lives would have been if you hadn't shot that rattlesnake, if we'd never met?" Adelaide asked. "Sometimes," Quinn admitted, "but I don't like to think about it too much. I prefer to focus on the life we have, not the lives we might have had." "That's wise," Adelaide said. They sat together as the night deepened around them. Two people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd built a love that had lasted a lifetime. Their children slept peacefully in their own homes. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren dreamed of their futures. And the Nevada stars shone down on the little house where it had all begun. Adelaide leaned her head against Quinn's shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, the familiar warmth of his presence. This was home, she thought. Not the house, not the state, not the physical location, but this being with Quinn, being loved and cherished and known completely. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Quinn replied, his arm tightening around her. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." And in that moment, with the man she loved beside her and a lifetime of memories behind them, Adelaide O'Connor Dawson knew with absolute certainty that love was real. It was worth every risk, and it was the greatest adventure of all. Quinn had promised to prove it, and he'd kept that promise every single day for more than 50 years. Their love story might have started with doubt and fear, but it had become something beautiful and enduring, a testament to the power of patience, faith, and choosing love every single day. As the years continued to pass, Adelaide and Quinn remained devoted to each other. When Adelaide's health began to decline in her late 70s, Quinn was by her side constantly, caring for her with the same tenderness he'd shown throughout their marriage. And when Quinn's own health began to fail a few years later, Adelaide returned that care, refusing to let anyone else take responsibility for the man she loved. They celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary surrounded by their large, loving family. James and Alina had organized a party that brought together children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and friends from across the years. As Adelaide looked around the room, she marveled at the legacy they'd built together, not just in the children and grandchildren who bore their features and carried their values, but in the love they'd shared and the example they'd set. Quinn was 83 now and Adelaide was 80, and they both knew that their time together was drawing to a close. But neither of them was afraid. They'd lived a full life, loved deeply, and built something beautiful together. One evening, as they sat on their porch as they had thousands of times before, Quinn took Adelaide's hand and said, "Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us. You've made my life worth living." "Thank you for not giving up on me," Adelaide replied. "Thank you for showing me that love is real. You kept your promise, Quinn. You proved it every single day." Quinn passed away peacefully in his sleep a few months later, with Adelaide holding his hand. Adelaide mourned him deeply, but she also celebrated the beautiful life they'd shared. She lived for 3 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling stories about Quinn and their life together, making sure that the love they'd shared would be remembered. When Adelaide finally joined Quinn, she was buried beside him in the small cemetery outside Humboldt, beneath the wide Nevada sky they'd both loved. Their headstone bore both their names and a simple inscription: "They proved love is real and worth it." James and Alina continued their parents' legacy, raising their own children with the same values of love, patience, and commitment that Quinn and Adelaide had demonstrated. The schoolhouse Adelaide had established continued to educate children for generations, a lasting testament to her dedication to making the world better. And in Humboldt, Nevada, people still told the story of the cowboy who'd ridden into town one summer day, and the woman who'd thought love was a fairy tale, and how together they'd proven that the greatest love stories aren't found in books or songs, but in the everyday moments of 2 people choosing each other, day after day, year after year, building a life together that was better than any fairy tale could ever be. Their love had been tested by time, by hardship, by loss, and by all the challenges that life brings. But it had endured, growing stronger and deeper with each passing year. Quinn had made a promise to Adelaide to prove that love was real and worth it, and he'd kept that promise for more than 60 years. And Adelaide, who'd been so afraid to love again, had found the courage to open her heart, and in doing so had discovered a love that exceeded her wildest dreams. Their story became a legend in Humboldt, passed down through generations as an example of what true love looked like. It wasn't perfect or easy, but it was real. It was patient and kind, faithful and enduring. It was 2 people who chose each other every day, who worked through problems instead of running from them, who built a life together one small moment at a time. And in the end, that was the greatest proof of all, not the grand gestures or the romantic words, but the steady, faithful love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. Quinn and Adelaide had proven that love wasn't a fairy tale, but something even better. A choice, a commitment, a daily decision to love and be loved, to give and receive, to build something beautiful together that would last long after they were gone.